Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Real Talk. It's Lucas here, and I hope that today's episode informs and inspires you to have your own real conversations. As always, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Trivan, maker of trucks, trailers, and enclosure buildings tailored to your needs. Be sure to check them out at trivan.com. A huge thanks to them for sponsoring the show and making it possible. One other quick note before we get into today's episode is that if you are willing and able, if you could leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on any of the podcast networks or platforms that allow for it, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that will be much appreciated as it helps get the word out there and lets people know what we're all about. So, with that in mind, on to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to another Real Talk Roundup episode. This is the number 5 of the Real Talk Roundup. Today, of course, is myself as host, Lucas Holfleur. Tyler is over there in the other part of the screen, and then below us here is Jon Dykstra, RP's editor. So we have a good roundup coming your way. We're going to be reviewing 3 episodes, of course. Episode 70, Why Should We Baptize Babies? With Reverend James Zeckfeld. Tyler did that interview. And then episode 71, Faithfulness in Public Life, with Al Sebring. Myself doing that interview. And then finally, episode 72, How in the World Did We Get Here? With Reverend Jim Woodavade. So 3 great episodes. And then finally at the back end, so stay tuned, stick around for this. John's going to give you his top 5 recommendation for books in terms of graduation gifts. So it's that time of the year. This will be coming to you Monday. Very soon, so stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. But first off, thanks for being here, boys. How's it going, Tyler, out west?
Good. After a short trip to see you back in Ontario, it's good to be here. Back in Calgary. It was, where it's mostly sunny, but it's raining today, so.
Okay. Yeah, probably can't complain. A little bit of rain's good. And John's out in the west coast there. How's things in John's world?
Yes, bright and sunny again. So, same old. Wonderful.
All right. So we'll get into episode 70 there first about baptizing babies. So Ty, you interviewed Reverend Zeckfeld on this. Then we'll go to you for some of your thoughts. Any points that stood out to you from this episode?
Other than we should have hit record like half an hour ago because we were chatting about this before we started recording, but that's how it always goes, I guess. I found it to be, I find every episode to be interesting. That's why I say interesting so much. It's something that I've been kind of thinking about when we were chatting about earlier about profession of faith, about infant baptism versus adult baptism or cradle baptism, adult only baptism, I guess. And we kind of do both. I know, John, you were saying something about like the why do we do profession of faith when we do it, and then why do we baptize babies, but then have adults who join the church profess their faith prior to baptism? So there's kind of a dichotomy. It seems like there is about how much faith should one have when they're baptized. And that's definitely one of the questions I had still coming out of that episode. I don't know if either of you guys have like thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think it comes down to we don't baptize people who don't want to be here. So if you're shaking your fist at God, then we're not going to baptize you. And that's the difference between just the adult. They make the profession of faith. They say, I love the Lord. Please, may I be baptized? Whereas the baby is ours, and we're presenting the baby to be brought into God's people, and the baby is not in a state where it's making a choice one way or the other. It's part of our family. But when you are old enough to make that choice, then we know that it would be, I think the Mormons do baptisms for the dead. We're not going around forcing people to get baptized. So we are credo and pedo, just depends what age.
Yeah, right. We're also not running to like the hospital to baptize kids because we believe they're saved through it, or Yeah, I think,
Right.
which is where I think we're on point with that. As opposed to some other denominations. I think we touched on that a bit in the episode too.
Right, because we know the character of God. We know this isn't he's showing love to our children in where they've been born, into the people that they've been born with. It's a privileged position, and so we're not worried about that. And at the same time, we do want to grab hold of God's promises. So yeah, we're very happy to have them baptized quickly, but not superstitiously.
Mhm. It really, for me, like reinforced the the importance of the sacraments, and then particularly baptism too. You know, it's there's so much depth to that topic, and there is such a spectrum of how it's viewed and practiced across Christianity at large. That yeah, it's just an important topic to get a handle on. And I felt I definitely learned a few things from that episode, but also I think further study would be good too. I think there's just a lot more to learn and to walk down a few different roads in terms of yeah, what do we mean by profession of faith? Is there a certain age we should be doing that at? How do we look at that as it relates to the covenant and to baptism? Definitely some interesting roads to still go down
Yeah,
on this
that
topic.
leads right into like Lord's Supper too, right? Which we're hoping to do that episode 2. I mean, this has been this series on the marks of a true church, which I touted as a series, has been probably 4 months in the making now, but it's yeah, I think the discussion of the profession of faith, the timing of profession of faith, the requirement for that, for things like Lord's Supper too, is really curious to me. Like I don't really understand exactly where we've been in history on that, but then like what are the things we should be thinking through when we're thinking about when and how to guard the table and stuff like that. Doesn't all play into baptism, but yeah. The other thing to me was I mean, hopefully more in the Lord's Supper episode too, but the baptism, a little bit too, the symbolism of it. Do we the feeling of the sacraments? Does that really come through in our church, or should it, or is it a knowledge, sign and seal? But do we have this, like, is there a feeling sort of aspect to this, an emotional, like the sacraments are supposed to assist us and strengthen our faith, but is that something that you're supposed to feel, or something that you're supposed to really like embody? It's something that like other denominations would really stress, or really like they would understand it different. So it's something also I'm really curious about.
Yeah, I found that I felt other people's baptism a lot more powerfully once I had kids, because I remembered it every time. I remembered my children's baptism every time I saw somebody else being baptized. So yeah, I get verklempt every time I see somebody getting baptized. So it's definitely
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I've had experienced the same thing. Definitely I see the parents up there, especially first time parents that well, when they have their first child baptized. Really, like, it really hits you, like, wow, like this is, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, mostly after you've made the promises yourself, thinking about what that promise really means, and knowing that it's not just like an easy road.
Right, Lord, thank you that you're doing this, because I'm going to need a lot of help. So yeah, very much.
Yeah. As a first time parent who just had to do that, I would agree. It's I obviously knew what it was, and I learned about it and thought about it a bit, but it hits home once you're the one up there, like, okay, I have to make a promise here. This is quite daunting, actually.
But well, in the danger of beating this to death, but do we feel that when we think about our baptism? That's more what I think. Like, I see it and I feel it as a parent, because it's a responsibility placed on you. But then, do you feel the promises, like the promises that are made to your kids? You're like, yeah, thanks, Lord, that I don't have to do this. Like, I'm just a tool here. But do we think about that when it applies to us? And then how do we view that in our life? Like, I'm baptized, therefore I feel, like, not necessarily I feel like this every day, but like, it's not like it's all fuzzy, but like, is there something real to that?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that can get in the way in life, in our day to day, that yeah, there's a lot of times where we're taking things for granted. I don't know if I think about my baptism specifically, but I do think about being in God's church and just the blessing of that. And I forget about it a lot too. But yeah, maybe when we're in the mix with the world a little bit more, then you just start understanding how incredibly blessed to be uh, with people who love the Lord as well. So
Yeah.
baptism is the entryway, like you're in God's people. So then is it the baptism moment that you think about, or just being with God's people?
Yeah, all the promises you have. Okay, well, that's yeah, we could probably go on that for longer, but I think we'll wrap it there. Lots to learn still, but we definitely did learn a few things from the episode, so appreciate.
Can I
Oh,
just
go ahead.
interject one last thing?
Sure.
The big thing when I was growing up was just Baptist friends, and the one thing I found very, very helpful on baptism was this idea of God always giving us more. And so when it came to whether baptism was for adults or children, it, well, God was looking out for the children in the Old Testament. Why would he not be doing so in the New? And it's always more. God's always given us more. And that idea I found a pretty convicting and pretty clarifying thought. So it troubled me for a time, does not trouble me at all now.
Well said. Yes, I agree. All right, so we'll move on to episode 71 there, Faithfulness in Public Life with Al Sebring. So I got to do this one. This was a pretty fun one, pretty easy, honestly, because Al loves to just sit back and blast out the stories, and he's got a lot of great stories to tell. He's a fantastic storyteller. So
Yeah,
it was
I don't know how you score an interview with somebody who's been in radio his whole life, and the guy lives in Alberta.
Yeah, true. Should have called dibs on that one, buddy. But yeah, it was that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I liked his story. Just a cool story about Charles and Diana. The fact that he bumped into them and the Secret Service almost did away with him on that. It was kind of a funny little story he told. But I don't know, two takeaways I had from that. One being about leadership and relationships, and just the fact that just being a relational person, putting the people before the politics, and just meeting people where they are and trying to find common ground and working together. I thought those are some good lessons to pull in terms of leadership, which applies in pretty much any position, honestly. And then also I thought just the impact you can make on a municipal level. It's just encouraging to see. It seems like small potatoes sometimes, maybe compared to like what the feds are doing or at the province, the provincial level, but it's important work, and people have to do it. And I would encourage more of our audience, more Reformed Christians to get involved, because you can do it. It's actually not that hard to get in. Just a little bit of organizing and a little bit of hard work, knocking doors. But yeah, just keep getting out there in community and building relationships. That was kind of my two takeaways. John, what were your thoughts for that? So.
Yeah, he also spoke to media bias, and it was kind of a little bit related to seeking common ground, and just the idea that back when he was doing this years back, there was an idea that you could just be fair, and that he was finding that wasn't happening anymore, that the media was getting more and more strident. And I would say that that's true too with trying to find common ground. Is I think those are all predicated being fair, being unbiased, and finding common ground are predicated on the fact that we used to have at least some common ground of a Christian heritage. And so where do you go when you can get fired for not using somebody's preferred pronouns, but to use them is to deny your Lord? It's to deny that he made you male and female. He made us male and female. I went to the World Journalism Institute this past week down here in the United States, and it's a group trying to teach young people how to be Christian journalists. I took this course 20 years ago. This time I just kind of went as an observer. But 20 years ago when I went, they were trying to make us ready to go into secular newsrooms. And this time around, there was just a different tone, because these kids asked, what if you get told to do a profile of the Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg and his husband, and their surrogate child. What, that's going to be a puff piece. It's going to be a normalization. There's no way around it. It's either going to be laudatory or it's going to be nothing at all. So what do you do if you get assigned that? Well, they were having a hard time with that, because you don't do it, you're going to get fired. One of the instructors had a helpful thought in a different direction. He told a story of 20 years ago, a World Journalism Institute student interning at a major paper and being asked to cover a gay pride parade. And the student refused. And she spent the rest of her internship answering the phone in the classified ads. His point was, it's better to get fired for something you do than something you don't do. So he said, I would go do it. I mean, frankly, it would be a Christian service to go back 20 years ago and have covered what really happens at a gay pride parade, because they were covering it up. They weren't actually sharing that. Now, if you really let them know what's happening, you'd probably get fired. But then at least you had your go, and you got fired for a reason. But it is a really different environment these days. And it's, I don't know if there's room in the major papers now for Christians at all. There's lots of room in all sorts of smaller papers all over Canada even. But that's the thing also with the common ground. Can you be relational with somebody who will be offended if you don't call them they? There's so many trigger points now for the other side. Al is still pulling it off. He's a very personable person. And so I'm not saying, just go in there, be strident. But the reason we had common ground, and the reason that we had this idea of trying to be fair, was because we had a definition of fair. Even as we tried to say, don't be biased, nobody would seek out the other side of a pedophile story, right? You would know that that's not fair, that's stupid,
Yeah.
right? So you have limits. While the other sides recognize that too, except they think the Christian side is stupid.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're saying, and it is a valid point, but I do think it heightens the need for leadership and those qualities. And there is still common ground to be had. It is certainly shrinking, and it's harder and harder, but we are still all human beings at the end of the day. And I think it's a lot harder to get mad at someone, faux mad at someone for pronoun misuse or whatever, or pick your sin of the day in terms of the progressive left. It's a lot harder to get mad at someone for that if you have a relationship with them already. So if you are able to form that on things we have common ground on, it's harder to find non-political things like sports or anything like that. It's all kind of become politicized, which is part of the Marxist kind of move on these things. But I think there is still a way to do that. It just is much more challenging nowadays. And those that are able to pull it off will still be able to have some sort of impact, because the alternative is everyone gets fired and there is zero influence there, and there is no light in these places. And how could we share the gospel or have any sort of impact that way?
But I would say that you can get fired, and then you can come, start off your own media network nowadays on some, Al had this idea of having a daily aggregator of all the great news articles. Yeah, you know what? And he seemed like he could have run it for $100,000. So maybe that's something we need. Maybe that's something RP should get into. So there's an option. I'm not against common ground, but when I see Christians generally seeking common ground, it means we're going to go hang out with the conservative homosexuals at Daily Wire, and then we're not going to talk about God at all, and we'll just talk about conservatism. We'll say, oh, those crazy transsexuals, and the conservative homosexual guy will say it too. Yeah, okay, but did we bring clarity and light? Hey, buddy, we both like C.S. Lewis, but C.S. Lewis said what you're doing is sinful, and you need to be told. We don't actually have common ground. We just have a common enemy. So it just seems every time the Christians seek common ground, it's to the quieting, it's to the muting of specifically Christian explanations, which the world is in crying need of. God made us male and female. How desperately does the world need to hear that? And it's just not even being said.
I agree. I think you have to kind of delineate between kind of the space that you're in. So the media space is challenging to do that in, especially publicly, like front facing on camera, that type of thing. I mean, who knows what conversations are had behind closed doors, but I agree. Yeah, if it's not working out for you at a major publication or whatnot, then go start your own and be that voice of the wilderness, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I wonder how much of it is common ground in today's media landscape, and how much of it's, admitting we don't have common ground and going to do it yourself, or like he's speaking about the changes too. Like, I mean, Al spoke about going into a newsroom and being told by a local McDonald's that they were going to pull all their funding if you didn't, if you ran a story, and that was just like a non-starter for everybody except for the management who saw the dollars, and everyone left. Like, everyone quit. That's just not, it doesn't happen anymore. But I think people just, like, conservative people are leaving these media organizations and doing it themselves. And I mean, there's a lot of different models and, opinions on how to do that. But I think that there's a big shift happening in that landscape. And, a guy like Al can probably get away with it still because he's, maybe part of the old guard, but young guys coming up, like, how do you breaking into that is, it's impossible pretty well. So, like, you gotta just work for RP. That's the bottom line, right?
Yeah, you work for RP. Maybe you can get in at Daily Wire. Maybe you can get in Post Mill. There are these other options, but we might have to create our own. One of the instructors at this World Journalism Institute referenced John Stonestreet. He talked about how we need a theology of getting fired. Like, we need young guys who are ambitious and particularly before you get married. It's a hit. It's a hit to get fired anytime, but it's not the same hit. And so, just to tread where angels fear to go, and why are you going this? You're going this to go out in a blaze of glory. You're not going out to be stupid, so you don't go where the door's just shut, but you're willing to go to Hollywood. You're willing to go to Daily Wire. You're willing to go to these other places and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then you also know, oh, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm not using pronouns. I'm not using your pronouns. Fire me. So we need a little bit of backbone on that.
I agree. I guess in my mind, I was thinking more, less, although to the topic, yeah, media for sure. But I was thinking more of his role in politics. I think a lot of that, what he described, you can get done, especially on a municipal level. It's very relational, and I think it's easy to it's all about like positioning your enemy in politics, right? But I think off camera and away from the bright lights, building those relationships can actually help get real things done and useful, God glorifying initiatives and policies passed and move forward.
Yeah. I'll just say, behind the scenes, I'm always coming off as a little bit more strident than I really am. Like, I've worked with the liberals to stymie the really crazy conservative candidate, things like that. So there are opportunities, and it does come with being willing to listen, being willing to talk.
Yeah, Al didn't encourage people to get into media as such, but he did really discourage people from getting into politics. Which is, I think that's what you're talking about. It's like the difference, the back end, like, a lot of things in politics happen not from the camp.
Oh, totally. Yeah. The media space is tough, but I think, like I say, locally, you can definitely make an impact that way. But yeah, I think those are kind of my takeaways. Are we good, John? Ty, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sweet. So we'll move on to the third episode then. Of the three, I mean, I don't like to pick favorites, but this was maybe my favorite of the three. It was a ton of fun. It's just a great topic. Who doesn't love talking about conspiracy theories? And especially if there's actually some meat to it, and it's not so much theory as realism. With just a great biblical lens to talk about this issue. How in the world did we get here with Reverend Jim Woodavane? Yeah, I got lots of thoughts, but you know what? I'll throw it over to John to start us off.
Yeah, I love Reverend Whitfield's book. I think it's one of these must reads. Everybody should go out and get a copy. I think it's also a book that many people might be, a quarter of the way through and think that it's a bit crazy, that it just can't be true, that he's exaggerating, that he is spinning some wild conspiracy theory. And it's just, he's not. He's not saying there's some brilliant person behind the scenes that's moving all the chess pieces, but that there are a whole bunch of organizations that are similarly arrogant. They all think that they know best and that God doesn't. And if they're going to implement their different views of what utopia is, it's different for each of them. But what unites them is that they all think they all need power to implement them. And what better way to get power than the government? So they all, the universal thing is they all believe in bigger government, because those are the levers of power. So yeah, I'm always worried people are just gonna get the book and just stop reading. No, you got to get all the way through. It'll open your eyes.
Totally. Ty?
Yeah, no, there's a couple things that he mentioned. I mean, I didn't actually get a chance to read the book, which now I realized at the end of this whole episode, I realized there was an audio version, which makes me, gonna get that and just listen to that right away. A couple things. Like the one thing was like the elites at the top. It doesn't really matter who they are. They all seem to be like, in the same world, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. Even thinking about what Al was saying, like, I mean, Al wasn't one of the elites, right? But like you do get to know these people on a way, like on a level where you're working together. So there's a certain amount of like cooperation and like stuff that goes on behind the scenes where you're having dinners with whoever, and like you have relationships with people beyond what everyone in the public sees, all these lay people like us. So that was interesting to me on the one hand, and it's hard to really quantify the impact of that necessarily, although I'm sure there's like lots of conspiracy theories that these people are all conniving in the background. But the one thing that kind of stuck out to me was, and it kind of plays into Al Sebring's world too, was the siloing. Like, and we just talked about media and like how maybe the solution is go do it yourself and have a conservative media source, right? We can have a way to bring all these media outlets together so that conservative people have a place to go to get real news. But Jim was speaking a little bit about like defense against propaganda. Like, how do you keep yourself from being influenced by these nefarious characters and like forces? And it's tough because in the social media age that we live in, everyone, like, algorithms are siloing us into camps, and it's not like if you're in the right silo it's good, like, which I always kind of thought it was like, well, as long as you get down the right silo, like this is the Christian silo, so go down there and you'll like, eventually that doesn't lead you in a good place, like, because you do need to hear things from other people that even you disagree with, in order to form like an actually critical thinking mind. Otherwise you regurgitate things that you hear in your little social media silo. And how you consume news and stuff like that, like, I find over my life, like every 2-3 years I'm changing my habits in that way. Like, I'll have Instagram for a little bit and I just like delete it because it's just like, no, I can't handle this anymore, and I go do something else. And I mean, I don't know, that maybe not the solution, but it's just the way to get away, disrupt that kind of silo where eventually you get to be, maybe you get led down a path to where maybe you didn't actually want to be, or your mind gets convinced of stuff that maybe you wouldn't have been convinced of if you were consuming content differently, which is, you know, it's not a problem that they had 5-10 years ago. Like,
Yeah, we're so connected nowadays, like the most connected we've ever been, but at the same time, we're the most lonely and the most the most alone, and also not connected in a real sense for a lot of people too, who live a lot of their lives online and whatnot.
yes, sorry, not to cut you off. That's exactly what Jim was saying. Like he said, like it's kind of, we talked about expressive individualism a lot too on this podcast, but like in the individualistic culture that we're being like is being promoted and we're being encouraged to adopt is actually our own downfall. We're turning into individuals living in like a virtual world, like online, and so you have your own feed, you have your own things that come at you personally, and then you're encouraged to express yourself, be yourself, you know, your truth, your experience. But then Jim was saying, like, you really need a family to bounce things off of and a church community to bounce things off of. And if you lose those things, you really just become an individual who's plugged into the government or plugged into big tech or plugged into whoever. Like, they can feed you whatever, and it's hard to keep that critical mind. Like,
Totally. Like,
you're not just an individual, which is really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, we've melted away or removed all the mediating institutions that were in the levels between the individual and ultimately, I guess, the government, really, right? Like, not many people go to church or participate in organized religion. There's less and less involvement in local social clubs and whatnot. And the family structures, obviously, like there's been a war in the family for decades now, and all those structures have been weakened greatly, and not to mention the rise of all these tech giants and whatnot now too. It's so easy to reach the individual. We are sheep. Yeah, we kind of are sheep, honestly, or at least primed for the slaughter in terms of propaganda. It's I don't know. The point that stuck out with me is it was later in the episode, we were talking about like family size and whatnot, and how like if it rains in the world, it drips in the church, sort of thing. And yes, okay, obviously the world is having less and less kids today, but we still have pretty decent sized families, at least in our Dutch Reform circles, let's say. But then I said something along the lines of like, well, yeah, it's quality of life or something. If you have like whatever, you gotta balance that. And he was like, well, what defines quality of life? And I was like, huh, fair enough. Yeah, it might mean, you can't do as many fun things. You have less money, but like, why not have an extra couple kids if you can, sort of thing. And it's just, it put a little like pebble in my shoe, at least. Like, I'd like to have lots of kids, but like, yeah, I don't know, 4 to 6, who knows, whatever. See what the good Lord gives us. But it just made me think, like, yeah, I think if it rains in the world, it drips in the church, and this mindset can just sneak in where you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to have a bit of that prosperity, and maybe you can get both, but you got to be careful which idols you're putting front and center, because they could so easily sneak in.
Yeah, because that's the key, is how do you see through the propaganda? Well, you test it. You got to test it against God's word. And so family size, yeah, as you say, it rains outside, it drips in the church. So in the world, 1 kid is your family. Oh, so then we have 3. We have a big family. I mean, seriously, we're shopping for a car, and there's not a lot of options between like 4-person car and 15-person passenger van. And it's like, why is that? Well, because 4 kids, that's just, why would you, two kids in the back and 2 parents in the front, why would you want more than 4 in your car? So that does impact us. And then what comes is we have a certain sort of self-censorship that shuts us down as well. Now, there's all sorts of reasons to be sensitive when you talk about families. There should be more 15-passenger vans in our church parking lots. Okay, but what about somebody who's infertile and is struggling with that and feels, very impacted by that? Yeah, that's true. That's a consideration. And we still need it to be preached off the pulpit, because God said it, that children are a blessing. So a lot of the answer to this propaganda and these silos is to have clarity on what God actually says. It's not just even a recent thing that we get all flummoxed up. We used to do movie nights with college age guys, and we did one with people from both sides of the border, so Canadians and Americans, and we did this one on gun control. And you know what? Right down the line, all the Christians north of the border thought guns were abhorrent and evil. All the ones south of the border thought guns were fine, and of course you would have one. You want to defend yourself. Well, somebody's maybe one side's right, but they can't both be right, and they're both holding to the Bible, and that it was without, it was to a man and to a woman, the way that this divided. So we got impacted by the country we're in, not the God that we're serving. So it happened long ago. It's happening now. We got to test these things, and we're in the community that we can talk to pastors, we can talk to mentors, we can send questions, real talk. We can do these things.
Yeah, it just reinforces for me, like, because we talked about a lot in that episode, how much of this is just straight up spiritual warfare, and the importance of going to church every Sunday and listening to solid preaching of the word and exegesis and whatnot. Like, it's, if we don't have that connection, and many in the world don't, it's so easy to lose your way. And yeah, like you say, John, just to go back and test these things against Scripture is the only way to keep your head on straight, and to it's the only way to keep sane these days. It's crazy. Just, I mean, I'm sure it's always kind of been the case, and it just seems maybe a bit extra today with the ability we have to be so global and so connected. But yeah, it's a great book, and I do like some of the suggestions he has towards the end and whatnot in terms of practical things you can do. He had a list of, I don't know how long it was, over 15, I think, at least. Just practical ways you can take care of your family, raise your family, and to help protect your kids from propaganda and make them critical thinkers. So people can definitely buy the book and check those out.
You guys didn't even get to transhumanism. I was excited about that. I was like,
yeah,
I don't know much about it, but I know it's like, it's the next real thing. So
yeah, just uploading your soul and your consciousness online. At least that's kind of the idea, and to take it the next step in the evolution of man and put us online and whatnot. Right, Kurzweil and all that.
Is that part of, I mean, yeah, we're probably dragging this one on too, and you like to keep these to 45 minutes, but is there an element to this, like this conversation with like conspiracy theories, or like, he's a conspiracy realist, he said, Jim. So like, is there an element to this where we're not taking it serious if we can't see the end game? Like, that's always, to me, it's always like, okay, well, where's this all going? Like, we talk about like the world, whatever, like all these world organizations, World Health Organization over the past few years, whatever crazy German guy, what's his face?
Klaus Schwab. Yeah.
Klaus Schwab. Yeah. So
yeah,
these guys, but like, if I can't see where he's going with it, do I really care? That's kind of always my thought. Like, can they really imagine the world that they're pushing toward, or does it matter? Like, or is it just a spiritual war that they don't even really know that they're, like, the devil's working in them in some kind of way that is leading somewhere, but no one really knows. Like,
well, I think we got into that more at the beginning too, but it's man putting himself up in the place of God. It's ultimately a utopian mindset, right? Like, there's all these various causes that they use, right? Like transhumanism being one of them, but like kind of the green movement and sort of the woke gender movement and whatnot, to coalesce power, right? To get a lot of people under a banner and to get a lot of people moving in the same direction. And they are fine with ostracizing and putting political pressure on the other side of their argument and whatnot. And these guys who are looking for more global control will use these movements to centralize that power. And ultimately, yeah, they are looking for more of a global government, because that would allow them.
Are they looking for it in small ways now, or is there really, like, this is when it becomes like a conspiracy theory, because is there really a vision for what this is going to look like? Like, I mean, you talk about, there's things like the Tri-City, the Tri-State City. They're talking about in Germany and stuff, and making like the Netherlands a city that's connected all over and without borders. And like this is part of the reason why there's a whole farmer thing in the Netherlands. But is there really a vision, or is it like political people or people in these organizations taking the chance to maybe have more say on healthcare or make money through healthcare or things like that, which all seem to lead down this road? Or are they really like, or do they see these as steps? That's kind of like underlies it for me.
I think the thing is, there's people who have short-term goals, there are people who have long-term goals, there are people who have unachievable long-term goals, and people who have goals that they're actually making their way towards. George Soros has been doing all sorts of things for, seems like 100 years now. But I guess to sort of lock it away from like the conspiracy theory of the super genius who's again got control of everything. No, God's got control of everything. But what these guys, DeSantis here or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on, things will all work better if we just give them the reins. Okay, so how are they different? They'll run our lives for us. Now, I would prefer if somebody were going to do it, that it's DeSantis rather than Biden. But I need the guy who says, yeah, you know what? It's really arrogant to think that I can run everybody's life. I'm actually going to back off and start getting the government off your back. Aaron O'Toole or Justin Trudeau, what was the difference between them? There literally was nothing, because they both thought they were the super genius. They both thought they had the omniscience of God, that they could run everybody's lives better than we can. And so there's that level of arrogance. The guy in Germany, Klaus Schwab, the guy thinks it. He thinks he knows better than you how you should run your life. And so he's doing it from the best of intentions, but we know where the best of intentions can lead us. So where this lines up with some political ends, it would be, hey, God gave the family, God gave the church, God gave the government, and they each have their own realm. And boy, has the government overstepped its. So, where we could see common ground with some people is, hey, you know what? We just like them to back off a bit. But with that then brings the need for us to also step up, because if we're going to say, we'll take care of the needy, or we'll take care of, this, that, or the other thing. Okay, then that means earning more, donating more. We're taking care of our schools. Shucks, we want to get rid of the public system. It's just a system of indoctrination. Okay, but then what are we going to do next? So,
yeah, we just continue to be faithful, continue to be involved locally, attend church, be involved in your church, and keep building when the world seeks to destroy, I suppose. Yeah, we can go on this all day, quite honestly. It's just, there's so much fun stuff to talk about.
It just sounded a bit dour then. It's like,
no.
God's got it. And
he does.
Yeah.
We're not doing it justice. Which Reverend Winneveen does do a great job of putting that into context, that we know how this story ends. God is in control. He is victorious at the end of the day. But the reason he chose that title, how in the world did it get here, is just to explore the machinations of mankind and what they are doing in this day and age. So it's important to know, it's important to be involved, to be aware, but ultimately, yes, Christ is king. Okay, we've been going on for quite a while. Well, John's got a cool little segment to end this off. Top 5 books to give as gifts for a graduation. Go ahead, John.
All right. So there are times in people's lives that you have an excuse to give them a book. And so take advantage of those and do so. They're done high school. Some of these gents might not read for the next 2 years, because I know I felt like that when I got out of university. So this might be waiting on their shelf for a little bit. But if you give it a bit of a plug, if you explain to them why they should read the book, it's going to be much more likely that they will pick it up and take a look. So I got 5 suggestions here. The first is Randy Alcorn's The Grace and Truth Paradox. And the reason that I love this is, first off, small book. It's definitely accessible. He's a storyteller, so everything is done with some kind of anecdote. But essentially what he's asking us to imagine is, what if you came to church and they read the 10 Commandments and that was it? So you come in, you've been told the truth, you're a wicked sinner, and we're done. Yeah, you got the truth, but you didn't get the grace. And so you're just left there and you're left helpless. So the church, conservative churches like ours that are standing up for the truth, can sometimes err where we deliver just the one. We just deliver truth and we haven't delivered grace. And there's a sort of grace. It's not exactly grace, but somebody can deliver grace that minimizes the offense of sin. So we'll be very gracious towards homosexuality. Yeah, by not actually telling people that it's sinful and that they need to repent. Well, now you've done it without truth. And that's not going to set them up very well before God. So the grace and truth paradox, brilliant book. Alcorn tells a story about how his church got protested by homosexual activists, and they met them with coffee and donuts. Wonderful. Grace and truth. For anybody who is trying to figure out what to do after university, Just Do Something by Kevin DeYoung. I've given this to at least half dozen people, and everybody has loved it. Everybody's been impacted by it. I was massively impacted by it. It's just, you want to know what God wants you to do, and how do you figure that out? Kevin DeYoung is basically saying, in short, well, don't seek sinful things. Ask people what your talents are. And then it's not, you don't have to make sure that you pick the perfect right thing. Maybe you're going to do a few things, but just do something. Don't sit on your butt hoping to make the perfect choice. Just get out there and start doing something. Very encouraging, very challenging, very much needed for a lot of people. The newest version of this book doesn't look like it, but it's Proverbs by Jay Adams. It's a commentary. You don't normally read a commentary front to back. It's called the Christian Counselor's Commentary on Proverbs. It's not just for Christian counselors. It has the entire book of Proverbs in the top of the page, and then it has notes in the bottom. And I use this for our family devotions. I've used this for my own. Family devotions is brilliant because as my kids are finishing off their plates, I can just quickly get 3 verses worth of insight from Adams, and then I can teach my kids what the text actually means. So Proverbs is something where you should probably only be reading 2 or 3 verses at a time if you're going to get it. So it's a great standalone to just use as maybe a devotional, and it also works wonderfully with families. Another commentary that works wonderfully as a devotional. I literally did read this front to back. Again, it contains the whole book of John. R.C. Sproul's commentary on John. Sproul is brilliant. This is wonderful. Would make for a wonderful personal devotion. You will not find a more readable commentary. I've given this one to a bunch of people, and didn't get quite the same reaction as the Kevin DeYoung book, but it's a little bit bigger. And to finish it off, N.D. Wilson's Death by Living. I really appreciated this book when I had just busy times in my life. You leave university, you leave maybe high school, you get married. You thought life was busy with sports and with homework assignments and with all of that. And then suddenly you find out that your kid won't sleep. You got spit up on your shirt and you didn't notice till you got to work. You're bleary-eyed, whatever. You're just wondering, come on, isn't like, when do I actually get to rest? And what Wilson writes here is, life is meant to be spent. It was a strangely encouraging book because it was like, yeah, you go to bed exhausted and then eventually you die. And that's what God is thinking. Spend your life, go do things and work hard. Don't burn out. There is a border point, right? But it was encouraging to me because I'm exhausted, and just to read, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. That's just the way it's supposed to be. Parenting's hard. It's a wonderful book, and the guy writes like a poet, and I mean that in the good sense. So great book, Death by Living by Andy Wilson.
Okay, very good. That sounds interesting. I kind of want to pick up that last one, honestly. It's,
Yeah.
sounds like a good one. We'll link them below so people can check them out if they're interested. And yeah, also I would recommend that Kevin DeYoung book. I read that a few years back, and yeah, just kind of confirmed for me, like, just go out and do stuff, man. Like, you're not gonna know it all beforehand. Just try it, and what's the worst that can happen? So
Otherwise, you wouldn't have got into doors.
yeah, yes, good old Tycho.
And would you guys have done Real Talk?
Probably not.
Right?
No.
That's a little bit more of a passion project than selling the ugliest doors in the world. But yeah.
Well, it's yeah. You just I don't know. We just did it. We weren't trying to be perfectionists. Obviously, people still listen to this, which is awesome. But it's nowhere near perfect.
Awesome.
We're trying. So people seem to appreciate it. So we're gonna keep doing it and try to get better every time. Awesome. Okay. Well, that wraps it up for Real Talk Roundup number 5. Thanks, John and Ty, for joining. And we'll catch you next time, folks, on Real Talk. Till then, ciao. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch the show. If you want to send us your feedback, and we'd love to hear it, please email us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. If you want to find us online or social media, we got a lot of great content there. Just search Reformed Real Talk and we should come right up. This show is created and produced by myself, Lucas Holtfluer, and Tyler Vanderwood, and our wonderful podcast manager who does all the editing is Mariah Tamiga. So we're really thankful for her contribution to the show as well. That's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.